Hello, my name is Matthew Harding for SIT 331. So throughout this unit we've used Postman to test our APIs. Well, today we'll be looking at two alternatives, Visual Studio and FireCamp. Now, we're all familiar with Visual Studio as you likely created your API with it, but you may not realize that Visual Studio can also test your API. It's quick and simple to use, requiring no additional packages. It works best for simple requests, however. Now, FireCamp is an open source program which is heavily inspired by Postman. It supports many of the features of Postman, but it can be buggy at times. There's no console, and the scripting capabilities are reduced compared to Postman as well. Now, let's see how they work in practice. So I'm just going to reset my SQL here. Now, this is my 5.1p project. What we do is we create a HTTP file here. So I've got one called test, and this is where you write the request. So we've got the post here to make a new user, and then this get here to get the robot commands. There's a lot of similarities between this and Postman. You can see that you can use variables here, like I've done. This is done by creating a environment JSON separate file. Now this JSON has to be in the same folder as the HTTP file. So we've got it here, and then you create it just like you'd expect as a JSON here. I called it local, and then you can reference that here. Oh, this one is unique because it's called HTTP client environment, so you don't need to reference anything special. It'll just use that. If you want to use a different name for your environment, you have to then reference it with one of the $signs first and the name of the environment. But we're just going to do it like this to keep it easier. So we've got a few headers here and the information. So let's start it up and see what happens. So we're running now. So you press send request here to do it, and then you see we got 201 created, so it worked, and you can see the body here and the headers and the request. So it works quite well. Now let's try getting the robot commands. Now my one requires authentication for this. This is where it gets a bit trickier because there's no built-in basic authentication. So the way I did it is by creating a separate project, very simple one, and you manually create the, we'll get the encryption basically. So if we run this, we should get a terminal here, yeah. So this is what we want, and I just copy and pasted that then over here. Now it's not very elegant this, but it does work, and then we can see if we send this request here, it does actually get authenticated and it works, and we get the commands here. So the Visual Studio, yeah, definitely works best with simple stuff, especially if it doesn't need authentication. It'd be best, but it works. Let's move on to FireCamp now. Now FireCamp will go here. Now you can see one thing looks very, very similar to Postman, so a bit of copying going on, but that's not a bad thing, I suppose. Robot commands, so it's all the same sort of setup. You can create the local environment, put all your variables here, get the initial, the current values, all the same really. And then if we run this here, you see that it works. You can put some tests in too. Now the tests, a lot of the functions that I used when I was doing the Postman scripts that don't seem to work. Maybe there's alternatives, but I couldn't seem to figure out what they are. Things like just getting the name of the request I couldn't seem to get, but simple ones like this do seem to work. So again, simple is better. Now one thing I should mention though is that let me turn off, actually I'll just reset the server here. So now we've got no users. So if I go back to FireCamp and we've got to create a user here and we try to do this, it doesn't seem to work. A little bit sort of flashes here, but nothing really happens. I played around this for a long time, I just couldn't get it working. no matter what I did. So yeah, it seems a bit temperamental, but I suppose that's what you get with well, you get what you pay for, is the old saying. So but yeah, so it works okay. But yeah, let's talk about the sort of overall pros and cons then. So one of the criticisms of Postman is that it requires users to be logged in at all times, and then it syncs your collections to the cloud. Now that's quite handy because then there's a backup of it and you can access it from anywhere. But it's a bit of a security concern, as then your information is being sent well over the internet and it's stored on Postman servers. And some well, enterprise settings just not going to allow their data to be sent externally like that and stored externally. So a benefit of Visual Studio is that you can use it offline. So you could have a computer that's not even connected to any network, having Visual Studio installed, and you could test the API running just on that system itself. So that makes it secure in terms of internet attacks, at least. Obviously there's still physical security risk there. FireCamp can also be used offline. So if that's an issue, these two alternatives are good compared to Postman and can be very useful. But if you don't mind about stuff being stored on the cloud, Postman is a lot slicker in operation. Let's talk about the overall comparison. So Postman, it's more expensive than the other two because they're free. You do get the free trial, but it's limited. FireCamp's open source, other two proprietary. Postman's definitely got the most features. It's got the most documentation. It's the easiest to use, most stable. So in that respect, it can't be beat. But it does have that always online, which may be an issue for some, maybe not for others. Depends on the situation. So there's a few options. At least now you've got the option of using what you feel is best for the situation. I mean, I think Postman's still the best option because it just works the best and it's the easiest to use. At least in my limited experience with Visual Studio and FireCamp, they can be a bit finicky to get going. But anyway, hope you enjoyed today, and hopefully it was useful.